So there we go. So welcome to City Plan 2024 listening session. This is our third of three of these sort of non-regular meeting type of listening sessions. Just a little bit of information about this. This is an opportunity for the public to provide any comment that you have on the City Plan 2024 draft or anything contained in it. It is intended to be a listening session. So I'm staff. My name is Kelsey Peterson. I'm senior city planner. I'm available to answer any factual or clarification questions, but it's not intended to be sort of a full debate or discussion amongst, the public and the members of the commission, etc. We'll start with a quick presentation just to lay the groundwork of what City Plan 2024 is, why we do it, what's in it, all of that sort of stuff. And then it'll be open to members of the public. We currently have 4 online and looks like 3 members of the public in person. We will accept whatever comments you have. The other piece of information is this is the last of our more informal processes for review for city plan. There will be a further formal public hearing process, both at the Planning Commission, which will be sometime in late September or early October, and then again at City Council, which will hopefully be towards the end of November. So there's sort of 2 more formal processes after this informal process, but we're hoping that any feedback that you have, you can provide now so that those formal processes are more sort of polishing the last bits of the plan and not making any major changes at that point. With that, I think that's really everything, and I'll turn it over actually, why don't we go around the room and introduce ourselves? As I said, I'm Kelsey Peterson, senior city planner. I'm staff. I've been working on this plan for over a year, and I'm primarily staff to the Planning Commission and the Affordable Housing Committee, amongst many other projects. You want to go across the commission?
My name is Donna Laban. Fairly recently on the Planning Commission, but also a very long-standing member of the Bike Ped Committee.
Lori Smith, I'm a new member of the Planning Commission. I live in Queensview Park in South Burlington.
Fred McDonald, also new on the Planning Commission this year.
Hi, anytime on the Planning Commission, and Kelsey, I've also worked on this for a year.
Okay, I'm Linda Bailey. I live over in the Chamberlain district.
And I'm Claudette Miner, and for 31 years I have lived on Simpson Court, which is
How do you spell mine?
Miner.
Are you related to somebody who as a legislator?
No, not that I know of.
He's mine, yeah.
Oh, yeah, nope.
I'm Karen Mills. I live at Indian Creek.
Carol Mills.
Karen.
Karen Mills.
And then Michael's questions remind me, when you make a comment, if you could just restate your first and last name and spell your last name, just because I'm trying to be taking notes as we're going through this. And in the back of the room, we have actually a new city staff member.
Okay. And Andy Brumbaugh, I'm the Communications Outreach Coordinator. So I was kind of here to observe how these things work and take some notes and get myself familiar with the process.
Okay,
Can
so.
we get the folks online to introduce themselves to Kelsey?
Sure. Yeah, we have 4 people online. If you don't mind unmuting yourself to introduce yourself. I guess I'll just call on you for simplicity. Barb, you want to go first?
Yeah, this is Barb Service. I live in Summer Woods off Patchen Road.
Thank you, Barb. Elizabeth?
Hi, it's Elizabeth Fitzgerald. I'm on Park Road.
Spencer, if you're able.
There we go. Yeah, I'm Spencer Baker, longtime South Berlin resident, live on, just built a new house on Highland Terrace.
And Colin?
Hi, I'm Colin Larson. I actually live in Burlington, but I'm an interested party here. So
Great.
thanks for doing this.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much, everyone. I think we'll do the presentation first, and then for simplicity, maybe do any comment from people in person, and then move to online. Just so we all know what's going on. So I will start this, and can someone online, whoops, why does this always do this? It always shows me the wrong thing. There we go. Okay, can someone online just confirm that you're seeing the first slide of a presentation?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, Lori, take it away.
Well, welcome and thank you for coming to this, our final listening session of this phase of developing the city plan 2024. And Kelsey, thank you for saying as much as you did, cut my
You've got more to say.
my introduction down quite a bit, which is wonderful. So the city plan 2024 is what will be replacing the 2016 comprehensive plan for the city of South Burlington. It's the municipal plan that lays out the long-term vision with shorter-term goals and actions for the city. It's an 8-year plan. It's required by the state in order to be able to amend our bylaws, receive state grants, et cetera. I'm sure that most of you are pretty familiar with the plan, given that you're here to give us feedback on it. So I won't spend too much time, but it's rooted in land use, but broadened by the legislature to cover major aspects of the community, including housing, transportation, economic development, economic activity, natural resources, and working lands, in consideration of a series of statewide planning goals. On to the next slide. In moving forward with this plan, the Planning Commission decided to elevate climate change and the climate crisis as an overarching theme for this plan this year. The world is facing an existential threat from warming planet and climatic changes with increasingly catastrophic consequences. This plan acknowledges this threat and prioritizes mitigation and adaptation measures to address these consequences. Action on climate change is the most important goal in this plan. And while we say that, it does not diminish the four guiding principles that we have for this plan, which are climate resilient, inclusive, fair and just, thoughtful and sustainable built environment, and collaborative and engaged. And they touch on housing and equity and all the things that are key to us having a vibrant city. It just says that we have a big issue in front of us that we really need to take seriously. So that was the thought behind elevating the climate issue to the overarching focus of this year or this upcoming plan. This is the timeline of this overall project, which started over a year ago, and will end December this year, January next year, and be hopefully adopted by the city council by February of this next year. Currently, we're in the May to August section where we're doing this public outreach and getting ready to get feedback or getting feedback from the public, from all of our city partners, whether they're committees or departments, et cetera, so that we can make final adjustments to the plan, get ready for public hearings, pass it to the city council, get the city council to have public hearings. There will be numerous public opportunities for feedback between now and the completion of the plan.
I also just wanted to point out, there have been, we started in January with public engagement opportunities with online written comment and online poll. And then February through March, we had 11 community conversations about different areas of the city or different topics. And then sort of, and went through an iterative process where the commission and our committees and staff departments all reviewed different sections, sort of section by section of the plan through February, March, April, May, and into June. So this has been a process that there have been public and volunteer committee involvement since late November of last year. And then we've gone through an iterative process since then.
And we will be taking all the feedback from these listening sessions, feedback that the planning commission has had subsequently, and feedback from all our partners in the city, and working to incorporate those into moving forward.
How much has been incorporated from those listenings?
Nothing.
From the listening sessions
No.
to date. This is a static plan right now. So what you had is what everybody's reviewing. And once we're done with the listening sessions, we will then review what we've gotten in the way of feedback and be incorporating that into
How much was incorporated from the earlier ones?
a significant amount.
That was the basis of the draft, is from the community conversations and feedback. It is not a brand new plan from the last plan, but the feedback from the February and March sessions formed the backbone of the update.
Correct.
And so as Lori said, this has been a static draft since July 6th, when it was published to the website. It was actually not changed very much for about a week before that as well, with the intention that we would gather all feedback into one big pile instead of kind of making changes and having people having confusion about what's the newest draft and what's the most updated. But there will be an updated draft at some point after August 8th that incorporates what the planning commission incorporates.
An enviable job consolidating all the feedback that we've heard in the listening sessions into one.
Pile.
Okay, and then you compile that by this August 22nd date, is that right?
No, so this will all be compiled by the end of this week. And provided in a packet to the planning commission for their review and discussion on August 8th, which is their next regular planning commission meeting, which is next Tuesday. And then the commission will decide what parts of the feedback, which bits and pieces go in, don't go in, etc. Then it will be staff's job to update the draft based on what the commission decides to include or not include. And then a new draft would be published in advance of the August 22nd meeting.
Okay, so we will have a new draft by then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we can still comment at that point.
At that point, we'd be, the intention or the hope is that the August 22nd meeting is when the planning commission can move the draft into the formal public hearing process from sort of this more or informal public outreach process, with then that formal public hearing occurring in the end of September or possibly the first week in October. So there'd be another formal public hearing towards the end of that month, because there's a 30-day notice requirement. So the intention would be to move it for public hearing by the end of August to be able to hold that formal public hearing by the end of September.
Okay, so the August 22nd is not itself a public hearing.
No.
If that happens, it's a
Yes.
month later. in
Yeah.
September.
Yeah.
So then you still have, after seeing that draft, the final, or that
Mhm.
intermediate draft in August, there'll still be time for people to comment and to make changes in view of the public hearing in September.
And
Yes.
again, with the public hearing.
And then
when the
there'll
city
be
council
public
has a
hearing at
public
city
hearing-
council,
hearing on the same issue.
which
Right, but
would
before it
be,
even goes to the city.
Yes.
yes.
Because once it goes to the city council, it's.
So you're hitting on exactly right, where we are hoping that what the planning commission moves for public hearing will be pretty close to the final draft. We're hoping to not be making big changes between the August 22nd or August 29th, depending on how it works out. After that point, there's an opportunity and there's public hearing, and that's another public process. So there's more opportunity to make more comment. But if you have things that you would like to say, that we hope that people are engaging in the process now and being able to say sort of as much as they can.
And at this point, I'll give a shout out to staff, because they have been doing, huge amounts of work on this and are really responsible for us being able to have this draft in the form it's in now, and just want to make sure everybody's aware of the huge hours that have gone into making this happen, so appreciate all the staff has done. And I want to move through this part quickly so we can get to actually getting your guys' feedback. So the future land use plan and the land use map are one of the backbones of this plan. And the map has been broken down into 6 categories of land use for our city. The land uses are on the right. They're primarily in the color that is on the map, with the exception of yellow, which is black because yellow doesn't show up as type, and the orange, which is sort of a gold color of the type.
Yeah.
But we've got principally conservation and open space, principally residential lower scale, principally residential higher scale, balanced mixed-use residential and commercial high scale, commercial and industrial with supporting residential, which is a new area on the map this time around, seeing a need for, or the opportunity for housing to be in close proximity to some of the industrial and commercial uses that are compatible with residential, potential residential use. And the final category is commercial only. And the plan is broken down into sections, and there you go.
Got it.
The sections are listed on the right, and the organization of sections on the left. They're organized into an introduction overview with goals, which are the overarching goals and actions to move towards those goals, inventory analysis and challenges, and additional resources. And though we have our 4 guiding principles, these sections in the plan are all of key importance to the plan. And as you dig into the plan, you'll see how we've focused on each of them. And these are the focuses of the plan. It doesn't include education because education is really in its own silo with the school department. Though we recognize the importance of education for our overall community. But climate change mitigation and resilience, housing, creation of city center, which we're sitting in and is in process, building our community, and environmental protection. And I'm sure you guys have given the draft some good look, and we're looking forward to your feedback. And aside from these listening sessions, at any time, you can email the planning department at that email address. You can stop by with questions or concerns, and you can always call. So we're really open to and looking forward to your feedback and ending up with a strong and functional city plan.
Yeah, the only last thing to add to this is we've put a deadline of August 2nd, which is tomorrow, unfortunately, for this thing. So if you have anything else that you'd like to submit in writing to be included in that packet for the next planning commission meeting, the deadline for that would be closed business tomorrow. So you can send that email to that email address, or you can come upstairs and talk to us, or you can call and we can incorporate it into that packet that the planning commission will be working on next week.
And with that, we are open to your feedback. So whoever wants to go first, state your name and spell your last name, and look forward to hearing from you.
I'm happy to be first.
Sure.
I'm Linda Bailey, B-A-I-L-E-Y. And I want to first thank both the planning commission and the staff for all the work that you put into this needed and necessary document. I am a native Vermonter, even though I've only lived in South Burlington for a little over a decade. I grew up in Johnson and then raised my kids in Jeffersonville, both very rural towns. I believe in climate change and I believe it is predominantly created by human activity. So I definitely agree with working to mitigate it and to make sure the mitigations are fair to everyone. However, I am concerned that our comprehensive, that our plan does not reach out regionally enough. Climate change does not stop at South Burlington borders. I think if you could, no, I know. So what we do here affects other places, what other places do affects here. And we need to work as a group. If you open up Google Maps, make sure it's in satellite view, ask it to look for South Burlington. And it'll give you an outline of South Burlington. You can see the trees, the greenery, and all of that. Then ask it to look at Chittenden County. And you'll see that there's a lot more natural area, green spaces, etc., outside of us that we don't want people to be building in. I think that because South Burlington is in the heart of the whole state's economic jobs, services, medical care, all of that is here. This is where most of the people need to live to cut down on the state's biggest carbon contributor, which is transportation. I know that I spent about 3 years when I was living in Jeffersonville, commuting to my offices down off Shelburne Road. That was very hard, a lot of carbon going out into the environment, as well as that's very hard on the personal life. 2 hours of commuting a day is not fun. The more people that we can concentrate here, the less of both those personal and environmental harms there are. I've read studies that showed that shortening commuting to go to work and services, except entertainment, all of that, if it's within about 5-ish miles versus 20 miles, the savings are humongous. I think that even though having green space in natural areas for humans is incredibly important, I think we don't thrive without it. We need to look at using some of our space more holistically, might be the way, I don't know, taking on the people to save the environment as a whole, and maybe giving up some of our meadows and such to perhaps some more high-rise buildings that can concentrate people. I don't think it's fair to ask the Williston Road and Shelburne Road areas to be renamed places that have the density coming on. There are things like, unless the bus routes have changed drastically in the fairly recent future, a person on where I live cannot get a bus to go and enjoy beer at Inter Park, cannot get a bus to go over to Howard Park. So those are cut off to anyone who doesn't have transportation and drive to them. So those sort of things all need to be looked at, particularly I feel the regional approach. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 2 issues. Could you go?
Name and
Oh, James Lees, L-E-A-S. Could you put back up that map, a map of South Burlington future plan? Because I just wanted to point to a couple of places that I think are, that I wanted to talk about. The future land use map. This one, 6. Okay, so the first one is this area by the airport that's now green. So we know green is principally open space, whereas yellow is primarily residential, it's zoned residential. And the city plan from 2016 had it white because it was indefinite. We didn't know what we wanted to do with it at that time. If you remember, if you looked at this 2016 city plan. I don't think we've got any of these white areas. Maybe it is, maybe it is a little bit left.
It is white.
Okay, so, let's just start with the environmental and climate issue. That's the primary driver. We know that Burlington just on Monday, was it, on Monday of a week ago, or anyway, it was just recently 12-0 vote. The city of Burlington passed a resolution calling on the Vermont Air National Guard to reduce its emissions to zero, to eliminate or substantially reduce their emissions, which means substantially reduce the F-35. That's their primary emissions. That's 99% of their emissions. So there seems to be a drive here, a recognition that emissions requires the elimination of the F-35 from this airport. But it's not just the emissions. We have 1,000 children, 1,300 children living in the noise zone designated by the National Guard. That doesn't include any place here. The noise zone is just a half mile on each side of the runway and 2 miles at each end. So it's an oval shape. If you live in that noise zone, you really know about the noise. If you live out here where I do somewhere, it's annoying, but it's not physically impairing your child. But it is in this area. And that's from the chief of pediatric neurology at the University of Vermont Medical Center, Peter Bingham. So I think the Air Guard is very much aware that they're hurting children. You're not allowed to do that under the military zone regulations, and it's not good for the climate. So this kind of noise is going to go away. We shouldn't be planning on keeping it here. Once it goes away, all of this can be residential because, in fact, it does go back to residential. When the airport got its grants from the Federal Aviation Administration to buy up all those houses and empty the land, 44 acres of 200 houses, they had to sign an agreement. And that's called the FAA Grant Assurances. All airports sign that agreement. And what it says is that you have to put in compatible uses with the noise. But if the noise goes away, the only thing they can put in is residential because it's zoned residential. Once the noise goes away, now there's a compatible use. Residential can go back, and it must go back. The land must be sold under that grant assurance for housing so long as it continues to be zoned residential. But if we change our plan to principally conservation and open space, what happens? Now then the city council can change the zoning and we could prevent housing from going there. And Linda's point is, why don't we put housing in the city center? Why are we going to stop it from going there? So I think that what we did in the airport expansion task force report that was approved by the city council, by the planning commission, didn't go to the city council, just went to the planning commission, was to not allow airport expansion and also to preserve this area for housing as a priority. That was one of the things. So I've sent a letter to you with quotations from that I hope can be added to the plan, because the way the Vermont Supreme Court decided is if you don't have specific and mandatory things in your city plan, it's not really a plan as far as a lawsuit is concerned. It doesn't do anything. It's like it didn't exist. So if you want something, you have to put it in the city plan. Isn't that right? With specific and mandatory language. Specific meaning what area you're talking about. You can't just say generally something. You have to say where. That's the specific. And it has to be mandatory that this is our intent to keep this land for housing or to keep this land for open space. Okay, so I would strongly urge you to keep this housing. Now, if it's housing, I think the city has is very open to even more dense housing than we had before in this area. There's a parking garage here. It's gigantic and it goes up 5 stories. So across the street from the parking garage, there's at least 10 or 15 acres of land that could be a higher density if the community wants it and the city wants it at that time. But at least it has to, so there you can have as dense a housing as we're seeing right around us in this new development that we have at City Center. And this is 44 acres. You had 200 houses, you could probably put 500 houses or even more, depending on the density that's allowed. And not only that, since this land is publicly owned, it was practically gifted to the city of Burlington. In fact, it was gifted. All the money to buy up those 200 properties was provided by the FAA. And it came out of the $2. It wasn't actually taxes. If you buy a ticket on an airplane, there's a fee, I forget what it's called, but that fee goes to the FAA. The FAA gets a lot of money and then gives it away for these noise compatibility things. And that's so, but they have grant assurances. And once that F-35 goes away, the noise plummets. This becomes a bit habitable again. And this should be a real objective of our city. We don't want our children hurt who live in this neighborhood. This isn't good for them. And we want that land back for housing so that we don't have urban sprawl. And that's my second point, which is the Wheeler Nature Park. I don't know if you can see the yellow area here. In the 2016 plan, this entire rectangular area was the green, was the principally conserved open space. I'm going to make the opposite point here. In 2016, there was no yellow little section in the corner. Now, if you're on the bike path in this corner, in this corner here, if you're right at that corner of Park Road and Dorset Street, and you look across this field to the north or to the east, you see a beautiful view of the Green Mountains across the open field. And it's getting, year by year, it's getting partially obstructed by trees and scrub trees in the shrubland. The shrubland is being allowed to grow there. But this is city-owned, some of that. The shrubland doesn't have to interfere. If you properly mow it and you control the scrub, then you have a beautiful view of the Green Mountains across the open field. And there isn't any other place on the bike path left in South Burlington where you have that. If you go to, there are certain places you can go, like here, you can look across the airport and have a fabulous view of the Green Mountains. Okay. So what I'm recommending is that what we had for both description of the Wheeler Nature Park and the maps of the 12 maps that were in the 2016 plan all showed this area, this whole rectangular area of Wheeler Nature Park as open space and nature park and preserved in perpetuity. The text in there was fantastic for preserving it. And I think it definitely, or I believe it met what the Supreme Court required. In fact, I'm a participant in a lawsuit to protect this area from being developed. With 32 houses that interfere with the view, interfere with the animals and wildlife in the park, interfere with the birds, interfere with the bobcats and the fox and all the other things that live in this grassland. This is a fantastic resource. And the Berglund study that the city commissioned says preserve grassland because there's these grassland birds. So this is very important to maintain the 2016 city plan again in 2024, because if the court finds you've changed it, you've eliminated all of those requirements, and there are 4 terrific paragraphs in there that should be retained that aren't in the draft now, then they could say, well, the city changed its mind. And that's one of the criteria under the state law. So I'll just say this one last thing. I know my time is way over. That under state, there are 2 things that have to happen for a development. The city has to approve it, and it has to be conformed to Act 250. One of the criteria in Act 250 is, does it conform to the city plan? So we're arguing it doesn't conform to the 2016 city plan. But if the city changes this plan and takes out everything that allowed it to be, then the developer is either going to try to bring that in our case, or they'll say, okay, let's start over again under the new plan. So either way, so the city made a decision to make an agreement with the developer in 2015 to trade land here in the golf course for this area that's, yeah, there was that trade. But there was nothing in that agreement that said the city had to change its plan, just its regulations, not the plan itself. So there's no impediment from that agreement. And because the state law really protects the views, it protects all these things, we should not change the plan. So I'm urging you to put back into the plan the paragraphs that were in the 2016 plan and keep the maps that were in the 2016 plan. Or if you decide you really want to show this area, then to put accurate explanation of why you're doing that, as I indicated in the email I sent to the planning commission. Thank you. And I apologize for taking so much time.
Could I have a question for Jim?
We have several people online who are wanting to talk, so
Yes or no? Is this matter Sam Rosa right now
This one,
under litigation?
yes.
Yeah, the question of how that land is to be used.
that's this whole subject of the litigation, yes.
Who else in person? Hi, Linda, did you have something to
Yeah,
add?
I just like Linda Bailey. I'd like to clarify what I said. On the map that you were showing a minute ago, though I do believe people need green spaces near them, I think we should have less green spaces and should take the hit for the environment as a whole of having more people living closer to where everything they do is. So I want to make sure I've been clear on that.
Okay. Someone else in person? Hi, could you state your full name and spell your last name?
Sure, Carol Heffer, and H-E-double-F as in Frank E-R. And I'm concerned about the loss of green space, very concerned. And I'm concerned that we have 14 bear sightings and bears walking all around. There's no place for them to be anymore. And right across my front lawn. And in Stonehenge, in Cedar Glen. I think we're wrecking our environment, and I'm concerned about that. And apologize, I haven't read the entire plan,
No, that's fine.
but I don't like all the development. I'm not happy.
Sorry, this thing has mostly been looking at me, so I'm trying to see if I can get it to look at people who are speaking in the room instead of just at me. Well, that's not good, is it? Well, no, it's still looking at me. Great. Like, okay, I'll hide. Great, thank you, Carol. Is that your full comment?
Yeah, I just want us to be running the city, not developers. I was in construction for many years, and I watched developers destroy towns in upstate New York, and I don't want to see it happen here. I moved here because it's beautiful and I don't want to be living on Long Island again.
If you speak up, that machine there will watch you.
Oh, that's okay. I'm good.
Oh, it turns automatically?
That's
Yes.
interesting. Yeah.
That's what it tries to do. But my typing, I think, confuses it.
It's also checking what's in your wallet.
Why don't I take data?
Yeah. Does anyone else in person like to make a comment this time? No? Oh, sure.
I will. Sure. Claudette Minor, M-I-N-E-R. And I apologize, I am not coming here as a well-informed member of the community. I just,
No need to apologize.
yeah, so
Open to
I
everyone.
was out on a walk, I saw one of the signs, took a picture of it, and then,
Perfect.
yeah, so thank you for posting those. I just have to I'm starting to feel like I'm just getting a little nervous. You know, like I understand that we need housing and I get all that stuff. I have children who live away who want to come back and they don't know how to do it, they can't, so. But I'm also watching, like I said, I live on Simpson Court, which is you come out Market Street, take a right, and then it's like, you know, right near here. And I go to work and I see what's happening on Airport Drive or Kennedy Drive, and then I come this way and I see what's happening here. And I'm starting to feel like I'm going, oh my God, like I'm never gonna be able to pull out of my road. I'm never gonna be able to, like, I'm just worried about the traffic and wondering maybe plan for that. And I just, like I said, I haven't been reading it, but that traffic piece.
We did this for the cold call too.
Oh, great.
That. And just sort of like I want the density, like everybody makes sense. I don't know how you people do your jobs, honestly, because everybody's comments make perfect sense and are all logical. But I'm rambling, I guess I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm wondering about the traffic and how that is going to be handled with all these new folks coming in.
Thank you. Anyone else in person, or should we move online? And we can circle back to in person as well if we have time. No?
Can I just say one
Yeah,
more thing?
Karen.
I know that we need housing, and I feel that the young people who are here, who were born here, don't have any place to live, and that's very frustrating. So when I see houses going up near me, and the price tag is $740,000, it's like, that's not okay. You know, I would even prefer if that was a whole section of affordable housing. You know, yes, South Burlington needs affordable housing. I don't want the young people not to have a place to live.
Yeah.
But to put up 33 houses that are each going for $740,000, please, that's not servicing our community. That's servicing people to come in from other places and feed the till, you know, and as far as I understand, all this land that's being built on was wetland. That land that was across on Spear Street, that was wetland. I thought that couldn't be built on, and here it's being built on, and I don't understand what that's about. I thought that was protected, so I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned. Very concerned for the wildlife, and I'm very concerned for our young people, and I'm very concerned for all of us, you know.
One of the reasons houses are so expensive is because they're in such short supply. If we can build more of them, that will create filtering that will get more reasonable houses built.
But then we'll look
And
like
also
New York
we're-
City, and that would really be a
I
nightmare.
don't think we'd ever be New York City. I've been there. but I think-
Okay, if
It's not-
we could move to some
I know, I
commenters
know.
from online, I guess I will call on people to make this fairly organized. So I guess we'll start with Elizabeth, because I think your hand went up first. If you could state your full name and spell your last name.
Yes, it's Elizabeth Fitzgerald, Fitzgerald. Maybe I'll take my photo off. I think that's distracting here with the light. First of all, thanks to the commission for developing this plan for the community to respond to. It's very comprehensive. A couple of higher level comments. I think it's appropriate to focus on the umbrella of climate. The observation I'd make is I feel like it's redundant to include in the guiding principles climate resiliency if in fact the umbrella view is a focus on climate. As far as the guiding principles go themselves, I struggled a little bit with the way those are described, and I think I heard a little bit of clarification in here. The way that those, what those words mean to me is sort of how the work will get done in terms of being collaborative or being thoughtful, things like that, versus a guiding principle or a value. I can understand that those might be lens through which committee work or planning work is done. But I think what I heard earlier is that there will be metrics developed that focus on how, in fact, those guiding principles will be incorporated into decision-making, into policy setting, and so forth. So that would be helpful to me, because in and of themselves, they really describe to me how work is accomplished versus what the metrics or outcomes would be. So the last area I wanted to just offer a comment, and I also got a little bit of clarification early on in the presentation, was that education is really excluded from this plan. And I found that kind of disconcerting, to tell you the truth, because the population based on the chart that's in the plan has the 0 to 19-year-old population growing at 14%. Which isn't necessarily the highest growth group, but that is significant growth, and significant within a state that is not seeing this population grow that fast. So if I look at the spectrum of both values and maybe needs that I would want to see incorporated into an overall city plan, and also recognize that there's a focus on land use, but also I could imagine that this is a place that somebody who would be looking to relocate to the area would look for. Is this the kind of community I want to invest in as a person or a family or whatever? But childcare and then pre-K through 12 public education, to me, is should be incorporated into this plan, and whether it's developed separately and concurrently is it's not that important to me. But the fact that this process has been going on a long time, and I have not heard a comparable plan that focuses on the values associated with public education in town, seems like a little bit of a miss in terms of overall describing sort of what the values and what the plan is for the city for the next 10 years or so. And I'd also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer a little clarification on that. The school district, the South Burlington School District, does their own planning process. It is not concurrent with our planning process. They're on a different schedule than we are. So a lot of the decision-making about their facilities and their planning for future population, for their budget, for their priorities and all of that stuff happens in their own process. The city plan comes from the state requirement or the state ability to have a municipal plan that was rooted in having a land use plan a long time ago, and it has since expanded from being land use only to including lots of other things. So that's why there's some discussion of education as something important to our community, and childcare as being important to the community. But we don't go much farther than that, because the actual sort of nuts and bolts planning process happens at the school district. Does that help at all?
Well, I'm well aware of that, but I think it's a mistake not to get those plans in sync, because being out of sync, and I would say whether it's land use or whether it's social value, we know there are land and facility issues within public education, and arguably they link into public safety issues and so forth. And I have stayed close to the work the school board's doing, but to not have those in sync with an overall city plan, I think is really a miss in terms of those processes being linked at the hip. And I think potentially some of the issues that have arisen around, the Rick Marcotte property being really impacted by the growth and development on Market Street from an access, from a safety standpoint, from an accessibility standpoint. I think not having those plans more linked in a timely way has maybe had that result. I think Jimmy brought up the issue of noise that affects the Chamberlain Elementary School, and that is the one school that actually has space in it, whereas the other two elementary schools are over-enrolled and have had to do things that take away accessible land that otherwise might be used for parking or recreation or whatever. And then Orchard is also over-enrolled and having to use up space with the ZEM unit. So I do think a city plan should incorporate the growing population of that 0 to 19 group in a more meaningful way so that it is comprehensive and doesn't require a community member to kind of go to another source, and also have those plans from a timing standpoint not or out of sync because the processes are different. So I'll just stop there, but that would be some of my feedback at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good point.
Barb.
Good afternoon. I'm Barb Service, SIRVIS. I live in Summer Woods off Patchen Road. And first, I want to thank everyone who was involved in this hard work. For years, except when I was out of town, I often sat in the back of the old city hall for city council meetings. And now I'm glad that remote access allows me to attend wherever I am. I've been trying to listen to the discussions about city priorities and know there would be more. I've tried to attend some hearings. Unfortunately, the recent illness and then death of a family member out of town has kept me away from some of the discussions. I would like to have been there today. However, life had other plans for me. The ARPA funds have created a new aspect of planning and visioning conversation for South Burlington. And combined with the discussions about the city plan, the decision about their use will also have impact on our city. And I've talked to the city council about that. But in the past, we've had lively discussions about a variety of topics that affect South Burlington. Of late, that balanced perspective seems to me to have been lost. The talk is almost all about climate change. Doesn't mean I don't agree with the fact that we have climate change, but I am concerned that it has become so overriding. The recent flooding across our beloved state is yet another reminder of the impact of climate change. And I agree we need to be concerned about the future for your children and your grandchildren. However, I'm concerned that the city council, the city committees, and the city plan have lost sight of the fact that today's children and families that need help too. Someone mentioned earlier that $750,000 homes, those aren't going to help our housing crunch. The city plan sets out some goals related to middle income housing, yet who is going to convince the developers to build more modest units? Then again, the last I heard, the definition of affordable housing was $319,000. That doesn't work for most South Burlington families. So I have to ask, who said South Burlington has the responsibility to solve the housing problem for the entire state? We need to do our part, but I think we need to be part of a larger conversation. In my and my parents' generation, the American dream was a college education and home ownership. And much as it saddens me as a retired college president to say so, I think both of those goals have been moderated. Many people live productive, enjoyable lives without a college degree and without owning a home. So rather than that dream, there's a basic need for food and housing security and good physical and mental health. Is there some reason we can't consider nice apartment options at reasonable prices? All too lately, actually, I've heard people say, I like the idea of renting. If there's a problem, I can call someone else who has to take care of it. The city plan encourages affordable housing, but does it really? Are there guarantees we won't see more what I call token affordable housing? As developers build, somebody said 33 units at $740,000 and fill their pocketbooks. I ask again, do we have a responsibility to haul out everyone, or maybe to meet our portion and even more of that portion of the need? At the same time, we already lost the concept of a city center that included open space. Now we have a city center that's beginning to look like a major environment, urban environment, with Vermont's concept of high rises and little open space for people to be outdoors or for children to play. Yes, there is open space in the SEQ, but what about the rest of the city? What about the parts of the city where middle income folks live, much less those who are in need of housing subsidy? City Council recently affirmed their commitment to trying to establish open space in the city hall, but there's no guarantee they're going to be able to negotiate that deal. So I think South Burlington is losing its concept of community by listening to the loudest voices. And I'm asking everyone to take a step back and to think about the many who cannot afford to live in the SEQ. While the voices of those in the SEQ are quite correct about the protection of open space, at least some sound a little self-serving and NIMBY-ish in my perception. Mine is a voice of one who doesn't live there, yet I support the protection of Hubbard Park. I do not support the continued covering of the little open space that we have left outside the SEQ. I don't support 8-story high-rise housing in other parts of the city, nor do I support more expensive homes with a modest allocation for a few. Can we look at what Morrisville did recently and maybe model that in terms of the housing trust? So climate change is real and we need to do our part. At the same time, the need for modest housing and spaces to play, yes, even a recreation center, and that is mentioned in the plan, where children and adults can recreate in the cold of winter, or like recently, they could have been inside away from the unsafe air created by the fires to our north. The city plan draft sections on community history and culture and recreation relate to huge needs if we are going to have a true sense of community. Yet, given that each of those sections only has 3 pages, says something to me about their importance in the process. I can only hope the final draft will have more balance, more of a sense of what some might consider amenities, and I consider them essentials. Will there be stronger language to support development of opportunities for quality of life of all citizens? And by that, I mean an environment that encourages everyone to play, to recreate, to pursue leisure in whatever form brings them moments of peace, much less joy. Recreation means places for people to be outside with their dogs, means public art to appreciate, and true places for people to walk. And I will insert my comment here. The Bike Ped Committee has done wonderful things for bikes, but we need to acknowledge the needs of people who walk and want to do that without fear of a cyclist who's going to create a dangerous situation. Unless you think I'm making that up. I walk long distances. Last week, I walked from Patchen Road to Overlook Park and back. It's about 12 miles. And on the shared use paths, more than once, I was concerned about my safety. So recreation is indoors, but it's outdoors, but it's also indoors. The library and the senior center are mentioned as facilities rather than programmatic offering spaces. So I think recreation is important, an important aspect of the quality of life, and doesn't get the recognition for people to make it an area of importance. So I would encourage you to do a little bit more about that. I could go on longer, but I've already, like one before me, gone on longer than I should have. But I hope I've made my point about balance. I want to be proud of my city. Right now, quite honestly, I'm not so sure. I will watch and listen and decide if this is where I'm going to be an active member or if there are other places where I'll invest my commitments. And that sounds like a threat, and it's not. Please know. It's just a sense of my frustration and my great concern that we have lost perspective. This report represents a lot of work and it's close. However, I'm asking you to consider a more balanced approach in planning for today and for the future, to consider a broader perspective beyond your own personal passions and those of the loudest voices. Consider all of South Burlington and the needs of the many right now, as well as the generations of the future. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Barb. Colin, you have your hand up.
Yep. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So I'll try and bring some of my perspective as a Burlington resident. As someone who, my primary modes of transportation are walking, biking, public transit. South Burlington has a lot of cool stuff in it, and I wish I had the opportunity to visit more often, but I don't, unfortunately, because of the lack of connectivity, which I do know is called out in the plan. And there's special mention, of course, of the east-west bridge, the connector, which I'm very excited about. I think that's going to be a real asset. So I got a chance to read through the draft plan, and there's a couple just things I wanted to hit. First thing, there's a 2.5% vehicle mile reduction annually, a goal through 2030. I would ask to consider raising that goal. Reducing car travel is probably the single best, fastest way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and local air pollution. And that requires a greater infrastructure spending in walking and biking facilities. So as a, an example, the state of California has a goal of 25% reduction by 2030, which would be a bit more ambitious than we're aiming for here. And I know that's a hard target to hit, but I think doing so will require a recognition, an official recognition, that the primary mode of transportation that we should be pursuing is not car travel. For a lot of people, I understand that car travel is still going to be a necessity based on how far they are from things, but we know from data that I believe 60% of trips in the US are less than 5 miles. So getting more of those trips not by car, I think, is the goal. I know there's a bike ped plan also in the works, so I guess I'll save some of my specific stuff for that. Hopefully I want to sort of interact on that as well. So some other things here for transit, I'm wondering if South Burlington would consider adding a Vision Zero pledge in their comprehensive plan. Vision Zero obviously being the idea that one pedestrian fatality is one too many. We should have 0 pedestrian fatalities at all. I think that the framing of electric vehicles as a transportation emission solution is a bit misguided. That right now they're only 7% of vehicle sales in Vermont, and they of course still contribute heavily to air pollution via the tire and brake dust. And of course there's the embedded carbon in the vehicle production. So once again, primary goal should be walking, biking, rolling, public transit. So then in terms of the zoning and land use stuff, which I think is where most of this is focused on, I think South Burlington is kind of in a tough spot here due to the interstate and the state highways, Shelburne Road and Williston Road. And it's so I don't know if the comprehensive plan is the appropriate place for this, but I think helping other towns around the state advocate for greater control over state highways from the legislature would be really valuable. I know particularly there's speed limit and road design limitations on what towns can do over state highways, but I think it's going to be absolutely necessary to build the walkable, higher density neighborhoods that we need right now. So in accordance with that, seeing more residential development on Shelburne Road and on Williston Road near where we already have these businesses and markets is going to be important. And it also helps drive demand for the pedestrian and bike improvements. I'll say that currently Shelburne Road has still way too much parking. It has a ton of underutilized parking lots. So I know that South Burlington removed parking minimums. I would ask that they consider looking at parking maximums as well for a lot of these locations, because despite removing the legal requirement for parking minimums, many developers and in addition, banks who give loans for developments see parking still as a requirement. So they'll exceed the minimum. Even we deal with this in Burlington now, still with residential development. And then for a lot of the zone that's designated as small scale residential, I know that there were changes from S100, the home bill that came up, and I'm sure that you all are working to integrate those changes into your zoning codes. So you'll forgive me if this is kind of something you're already looking at, but I think a lot of the low scale residential should also allow, multifamily development, which I think it should already from the state law, but up to a 4-unit building in a lot of these lots, as some of the other people in the meeting have mentioned. not expanding the footprint of suburban development further than it is now should be the goal. But in order to do that and create more affordable housing, we need to do the infill development in existing residential neighborhoods. And I do agree with what the plan said about perhaps allowing small scale commercial in those same areas. You know, you can imagine things like coffee shops, bakeries, smaller scale restaurants. These are the things that places people want to go and they won't have to drive to do so. And then I think my last thing is, I was looking at the map and I was trying to figure out where the country club is in the zoning, on the zoning map, and it seems like it's marked as a conservation and open space zone. You know, I would argue that a golf course is neither a conservation use or an open space use, as it is a private golf course. So I don't know in regards to the town of South Burlington, what plans or, you know, ideas they would have about this long-term, the country club. But a curated private golf course is not consistent with our understanding of sustainability. So I don't know if there's a local land use tax ability or, you know, more potential to induce housing development in that area or something. You know, it's a 2-mile straight shot from where the country club is to the U Mall, and there's an existing multi-use path. So to me, this is like a prime target for infill development. Or if the idea is to conserve this as open space, then it should be that and not a golf course. Again, I understand it's a private facility, so I am, you know, the town is limited in what it can do, but that's my feeling is that golf courses are not compatible with a climate resilient future. Thank you.
Thank you. Connie, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. My name is Connie Stabler. Last name is spelled Stabler. I live on Clover Street, which is in the Chamberlain neighborhood near the airport. And I want to add my voice, and a couple people who went to earlier sessions in development of this plan mentioned this as well, that there should be something in the plan. I apologize, I have not read the plan, but I don't believe the whole plan, but I don't believe there's anything in there about keeping the airport from encroaching further into the Chamberlain neighborhood. They tried last year, I think it was, or maybe the year before, to get a zoning change, which I'm very grateful that was not approved. Because they wanted to put maintenance buildings in some of the space, what is green space now, that were houses that had to be taken out because of the F-35s. And I hope that there is something, if there is, I hope, if there isn't, I hope something will be put in the plan about not allowing them to encroach further into the neighborhood that they have already taken so much from. And I want to say that, you know, I can watch the F-35s take off from my house, and but I'm not, you know, dealing with the noise. It's very annoying and, you know, difficult, and you know, but I am concerned about these elementary school children that live a block away from me and live about a block and a half from the airport. And why we allowed F-35s to be brought in to a neighborhood. First of all, a neighborhood. They should never be in an area that has population around it. And I hope that the representatives in Washington, our representatives there that allowed this and promoted this are ashamed, because to allow that to come into a neighborhood, and also this neighborhood is one of the few affordable housing areas in this city. Yes, we're building more in the Southeast quadrant. We are building apartments, lots of them, on the city center. Where are we putting the single family homes and the duplexes? This neighborhood has that, and we lost some of that. And so I also hope in the plan that you will have something that says that this will always and forever be kept zoned as residential. So that when the F-35s leave, we can go back and we will be able to build some affordable housing. I know that South Burlington says their hands are tied about getting rid of the F-35s. I'm not really sure I buy that, and I'm not sure how hard anybody has tried. But I think that we should try to get rid of them as quickly as possible so that we can build more affordable housing in a neighborhood that was decimated by these F-35s. So that's, mostly my concern today, and the reason that I was wanting to let you know how I feel. This neighborhood is, I know because I took a petition around when we were trying to get the zoning regulation kept, to residential. The people here don't have a lot of time. These are hardworking people that don't have a lot of time to go to your hearings, to write you letters. And they had no idea this was happening. And we're happy to sign a petition to keep it from encroaching into their neighborhood even further. They didn't like the fact that the F-35s were here, but they didn't feel like they had the time or energy or wherewithal to fight against that. And I don't know if it would have helped anyway. But I want to tell you that the people here agree with me on this matter. And I hope you don't think that because they're not here complaining to you about it, that they don't feel that way. You hear from a lot of people that live in the Southeast Quadrant, and I want to know why we are overlooking this area where we could build again more affordable housing, because what we're building now doesn't look to me to be what we're talking about when we say affordable housing. So I thank you very much for having these hearings, and I thank the committee very much for working on this plan. I know it's a very big task, and I hope that you will listen to my voice and the voices of others in the Chamberlain neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. It looks like Spencer would be next. Do you have something to share, Spencer?
No, I'm just listening in, taking it all in. Thank you.
Okay, and we have one person calling in on a phone. Both Spencer and a person on the phone are muted. If you'd like to speak, you could unmute. Or let me know, yeah, or let us know if you'd like to speak. Or not. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone else online who would like to speak. Does anyone in the room want to share anything else? Or we can wrap up. I should restate both to Spencer and the person on the phone, or anyone else, that you can still submit a written comment. You can email that to planning@southburlingtonvt.gov. The deadline for that for this round, which is intended to be the most, the meatiest, most substantive round, would be close of business tomorrow. So if you're having tech problems and you can't unmute or you can't join, you can absolutely still submit an email, or you can give us a call at 802-846-4106. That's for anyone in the room as well as online.
Oh, I didn't even realize that you can actually just call in your comment.
Sure.
Okay, great, thank you.
We received your written comment though, Jimmy, so you don't necessarily need to come.
Thank you.
Once or
Right.
twice.
Yeah.
What was the date that the Burlington Council wanted the commission to reach zero in their resolution?
Yes, it was last Monday.
So I mean, when do they want that to happen?
Oh, but they wanted to reach zero by 2030.
Okay, well,
Kelsey,
Yeah.
I also
They,
had a
there
question.
was an amendment to substantially reduce or eliminate. So they added substantially reduce or by 2030.
One of the callers mentioned, like a 30%, he was referring to 2.5%. Now that's a 2.5% annual
Yes.
reduction.
Yep.
And so I was just curious, what does that amount to by 2030? And because,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like,
yeah, somewhere around 15%,
so 15.
give or take. I
Except
don't-
it also accumulates
Because you've reduced it.
already
It's-
reduced.
It depends how you're counting it. If it's
Right.
2.5% of
Of
this
each-
year,
of
every
each
year, or if it's 2.5% reduction year over year, it's a couple of different things.
Right.
I'm not actually sure what the details are of that. It's a goal that comes directly from the climate action plan.
Right.
So there may be more details in the climate action plan. Because for a lot of these things, we do refer directly to the climate action plan, because that was adopted by the city last summer. So some of our climate things come directly from that document.
Well, and the transportation plan is, the implementation plans for that are currently being worked on.
Yep.
And so hopefully that kind of detail will be spelled out.
Yes.
It's like, what does this amount to?
Yep.
Because 2.5% is, it's a fairly substantial amount
Yeah.
of reduction.
Yeah.
And I personally did it last year by riding an e-bike
Mhm.
as much as I could.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to figure out, well, what do I do this year? How do I reduce it another 2.5% this year? It's not the easiest goal to make. you
No,
know,
and
without
it's,
making some pretty substantial personal changes. And-
yeah, and part of it is not necessarily that each individual is accomplishing that, but you may have people who, when city center is developed to a certain extent, you'd be able to live here, grocery shop here, take the bus to work, and that person may have 0 vehicle miles traveled.
Yeah.
When someone who's living farther out in any direction or is commuting to Montpelier or somewhere may not be reducing their vehicle miles traveled. So it's a community-wide metric, not necessarily individuals doing it year over year, the
Yeah,
same,
and-
but it's a good goal.
And I thought, for people in this room, I thought it'd be interesting just to ask a general question. It's just like, do what would get you to use public transportation more? Or, ride and walk more, than using your personal car? It's a good thought for everybody to consider.
We don't have public.
Availability is the issue.
Yeah.
There's nothing that goes up Spear Street
Right.
or goes down into Cedar
So,
Gardens.
so that's actually making public transit accessible to other parts of the city.
Yeah, I can walk down through the park to Farrell Street down to, Shelburne Road, but I have to make that walk before I can.
Right.
Great, if there aren't any further public comments, either online or in person, we can wrap this up. As I said, for this sort of round, with a deadline by tomorrow to submit anything written, we'll all go into a packet. The planning commission will review and consider on Tuesday. As someone in the room pointed out, there are a lot of goals and a lot of different perspectives that all individually make a lot of sense, but it's a pretty big task to make them all mesh together. So I just don't want anyone to feel discouraged if you don't see what you've commented on appearing in the next draft. Those kinds of policy balancing decisions will have to be made by the planning commission in the coming weeks.
And
Because
it's
we
not
can't-
easy.
We can't really have a plan that says, everything that everyone says and internally contradicts itself significantly. There are certainly things that are nuanced in that way, but just setting that expectation. And as I said, the next steps would be going for the planning commission to be able to update their draft, to move that updated draft to public hearing. Public hearing schedule is likely the end of September or possibly the first couple days of October at the planning commission level. And then again, what happened towards the end of November, middle to end of November at the city council level. So there's a couple of public hearing processes that will be occurring through the fall. So just pay attention to that if you want to attend any of those public hearings. Otherwise, there's some snacks and a couple of seltzers in the back. If anyone wants to grab anything on your way out, you're welcome to. Thank you very much for participating and attending this listening session. And thank you again for all of your feedback.
And thank you for your.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This report